We tend to think dangerous people show up with threats, but the most dangerous ones often arrive with care. They smile, they help, they say all the right things, and before you realize it, you're living by their rules. I'm Brian. Today we're going to break down 8 kindness traps, situations where good intentions look real, but slowly become a way to control you. This is about telling real respect apart from polished gestures that come with pressure attached. And I want you to stay to the very end, because the last trap is the quietest and the most damaging. Most people don't fall into it with enemies. They fall into it with someone close, and they don't even notice it happening. What I'll share at the end isn't just advice. It's a way to protect who you are without destroying the relationships that truly matter. The first trap we'll start with is called the sugar storm. It happens when a new person enters your life, a partner, a friend, even an employer. And from the very first days, they flood you with admiration and attention. They tell you you're special, that you're a rare professional, that you're exactly who they've been searching for years. It feels like warm rain after a long drought. You soften, you relax, your guard drops, because all of us want to believe that finally someone has really seen us and valued us. But with time, you realize it isn't recognition, it's an advance. And sooner or later, that advance comes with a bill. They feed you sweet words until you get used to their approval. And once you start depending on that feeling, the attention suddenly stops. They turn colder, they create distance. It's like someone switching off the lights, and you start scrambling, trying to bring that earlier warmth back. You try harder. You excuse more. You take on extra work. You tolerate things you would never have accepted before. Not because you're being forced, but because you want to hear those first words again. The ones you heard at the beginning. A sugar storm breaks your will without pressure or shouting. You simply sink into syrup you allowed someone to pour. I remember the first time I ran into this. I was much younger, working in a small shop, learning to read people as carefully as I read the products on the shelves. One day we got a new supplier. Let's call him Daniel. He was loud and confident, with an easy smile, and on the first meeting, he spoke like we'd known each other for years. He praised the way I handled customers. He said I had a rare instinct for deals. He brought small gifts, and he kept telling me that, with my approach, I'd go far. I walked around feeling lifted. It felt like, finally, someone had seen potential in me. The shop owner, a calm, observant man who rarely stepped into other people's conversations, watched from the side. One evening, as we were closing up, he stopped me with a small gesture and said quietly, "Brian, don't rush to believe someone who tries to become close to you in a single week. Real respect grows slowly. Anything that happens too fast is usually happening for a reason, and it's rarely for your benefit." At the time, I brushed him off. I thought he was cautious, old school, and didn't understand how connections are made now. But only a couple of months passed. Daniel, using my trust, asked me to hand over stock with no paperwork, supposedly for an urgent deal. He spoke with confidence, like everything was already agreed, and I just needed to help him out for a minute. I said yes. After that, I never saw Daniel again. Not the goods, not the money. He vanished as quickly as he appeared, leaving behind nothing but the echo of his compliments. And only years later did I understand what had really happened. That flood of praise wasn't there to support me. It was there to blind me, to make me open doors I would normally keep closed. Since then, I've looked at fast closeness differently. If someone tries to take up all the space in your world very quickly, there's a good chance they don't want to become part of your life. They want to push your caution out of it. The second trap is far more dangerous than open aggression. When someone shouts at you, you can respond. When they accuse you, you can defend yourself. You can see the conflict. You understand what's happening. You can take a position. But here, it works differently. You're wrapped in a soft, sticky kind of care, and every argument sinks inside it. This trap targets people with a conscience, and that conscience is exactly what gets used against them. The mechanism is simple. The other person puts themselves above the conflict. They don't argue. They don't raise their voice. They look at you with a sad smile and say, "Don't worry, I'm used to being misunderstood." Or, "I'm not offended. I still wish you well." And then something strange happens. You haven't done anything wrong. You might even be right, but you've already been forgiven, and if you've been forgiven, it quietly implies you're guilty. That thought settles inside you without you noticing. They step onto a moral pedestal, generous, patient, calm, and you're left underneath, feeling rough, ungrateful, clumsy. Over time, you stop defending your boundaries. How do you argue with someone who endures everything for your sake? So you start speaking more quietly, agreeing faster, apologizing even when you're not sure you did anything wrong. Life becomes constant repayment for a guilt that never really existed. I understood this for the first time when I was young. In our area, there was a distant relative of the family. Her name was Marta. She seemed incredibly gentle. She never raised her voice. She never demanded help directly. But every time I left her house, I felt like I'd done something wrong. One day, I was asked to help her move a heavy wardrobe. I came over with energy, genuinely wanting to help. While we were shifting the furniture, I accidentally brushed her old vase. It didn't break. It only got a small scratch. I started apologizing. I offered to replace it, to do whatever was needed. Marta didn't raise her voice. She just sighed, ran her finger across the glass, and said softly, "It's all right, Brian. It's just a memory of my mother. The important thing is you wanted to help. I'm not angry." Those words hit harder than any accusation. I felt awkward, like I'd damaged something important. For the next few months, I went to her place almost every week. I fixed her fence, carried groceries, helped around the house, like I was trying to repay an invisible debt. And every time she met me with that same quiet smile, and somehow it only made the weight heavier. One evening, I was sitting on my front steps, and my neighbor Victor sat down beside me. He was a former judge, a man of few words, someone used to looking at situations without extra emotion. He'd noticed how often I went to Marta's, and he asked me directly, "Brian, are you helping her because you want to, or because you feel guilty?" I told him about the vase, about her words, about that strange sense of obligation that wouldn't let go. Victor listened, then said calmly, "You know, real apologies end quickly. Someone says it's fine, and life moves on. But when you're forgiven in a way that's too polished, sometimes it's not about peace, it's about control." He looked at me carefully and added, "Judges see this all the time. A person doesn't resolve the conflict. They place themselves above it, so the other person keeps feeling they owe something. That's not forgiveness. It's a way of holding power." His words sounded harsh, but there was a strange clarity in them. "If being around someone constantly makes you feel small and indebted," Victor continued, "then it's not your mistake. It means someone is feeding off your guilt." That evening, for the first time, I let myself see it differently. I realized I wasn't helping out of desire. I was helping out of a debt I'd placed on myself. And the next time someone said to me, "I forgive you, even though you hurt me," I answered calmly, "Thank you. But I don't need forgiveness for something that wasn't done with malice." And surprisingly, after that, the conversation immediately became more honest. All of us are afraid of loneliness. So when you walk into a new job, a new team, or a new community, and they tell you right away, "Relax, there are no outsiders here. We're one big family," your heart warms up. You lower your guard. You think, "Finally, I'm home. Nobody will set me up here. Someone will look out for me." But listen carefully. A family is where you're accepted without conditions. A family is a bond that doesn't depend on profit. Work, business, projects is different. It's where people exchange time and skills for money. That's a fair agreement. So when a leader starts replacing team with family, pay attention. Because in a real family, help is natural. A mother doesn't send her child an invoice for dinner. A brother helps a brother move house, not for payment, but because it's family. But when that model gets dragged into the workplace, people start expecting selflessness where boundaries should exist. They ask you to stay late. Come on, and we're family. We have to cover for each other. They delay your pay. It's a tough period. Family has to stick together. You ask for holiday time or you bring up a raise, and suddenly you feel like a traitor. This trap erases boundaries. You stop knowing where your professional responsibility ends and where your personal life begins. It becomes awkward to ask for what is yours by right. How do you talk about money when the boss is under pressure? How do you ask for fairness when they tell you you're part of something bigger? So you start working for an idea, for praise, for a sense of belonging, while the person who invented this family builds their comfort on your unpaid effort, and eventually burnout arrives. You give everything, thinking you're building a shared home, and when your strength runs out, you realize, in business, there are no relatives. There are only resources. I learned this from my own experience. When I was younger, I got a job at a large clothing workshop. The owner's name was Mark. He was charismatic. He didn't sit behind a closed door. He walked between the machines, patted employees on the shoulder, knew our children's names. Every morning he started with the same speech. Friends, we're not just making clothes. We're creating something bigger. You're not employees, you're family. And I believed him. I arrived earlier than everyone. I left later than everyone. It felt like I'd found a mentor and a place that valued not only results, but the person. Then the workshop landed a massive order. The deadline was almost impossible. Mark gathered us one evening and said, "Things are hard right now. There's no money for overtime. But once we close this contract, everything will change. I don't abandon my own." We believed him. We worked nights. We slept on rolls of fabric. I felt like part of something big, like we were building a shared future together. That went on for 6 months. The order was delivered. The money came in. I went to Mark, expecting the same warmth as before, but he sat at his desk sorting papers and didn't even look up. "Brian, times are tough. I can't pay more. Be grateful you've got a job at all." I froze. "But you said..." "We're family," I started. He cut me off. "Family is at home. This is business. Don't confuse emotion with reality." I walked out feeling empty. The world had flipped upside down. I didn't just feel deceived, I felt used. That evening I sat in a small diner not far from the workshop. A senior employee named Michael was there, a quiet man who rarely joined the group conversations. He looked at me and asked, "Brian, what happened?" I told him everything, the promises, the night shifts, the office conversation. Michael listened without judgment. Then he said, "Leaders sometimes call the team a family not because they see you as family, but because it's convenient. Family doesn't argue about money." He paused. "If someone calls you a brother, check whether they share profit with you as fairly as they share the work." I stayed quiet. "A real partner makes you stronger," he continued. "But someone who remembers family only when they need more work for the same money is just trying to get more from you than they should." His words were calm, with no anger, and that's why they sounded truer than any accusation. That night I realized I'd been looking for belonging at work, when what I should have been looking for was respect and honesty. And since then, whenever I heard the phrase in an interview or a new company, "We're one big family here," I would smile and answer calmly, "I already have a family. Here, let's agree on a fair price for my work." And life became much easier once that boundary was in place. Every person, even the most modest one, wants deep down to feel special. We want to believe there's something unique in us, a skill, a character, a kind of reliability that others don't have. And one of the quietest traps is built on that exact need. The phrase sounds almost like a compliment, "I only trust you." But it doesn't open the door to respect. It opens the door to a burden nobody else wanted. The point of this trap is simple. It creates the illusion that you're irreplaceable. They tell you, "Listen, this is delicate. I can't give it to anyone else. One person will ruin it, another will let me down, a third can't handle it. Only you have the patience for this." And in that moment, you feel important. You feel chosen. Responsibility feels like an honor. But look closely, and it usually means one thing. You're the only person who will agree to do the hard, awkward, thankless work without too many questions. They're not trusting you with power. They're not trusting you with decisions. They're trusting you with the problem. So you start working more than you should. You take on other people's duties. You give up rest because you're afraid of losing that status, the one they trust. And slowly you become a hostage to your own reputation. I understood this after something that happened to me many years ago. In our town, there was an organizer of big celebrations. His name was Leo. He was loud and energetic, always smiling, and he had a way of talking that turned any conversation into a performance. One day he came up to me in the town square, pulled me aside, and lowered his voice. "Brian, I've got a difficult situation. There's a wedding coming up, 300 guests. I need to deliver rare wine from an old warehouse on the other side of the city. The road is bad, mud, stones. The drivers are unreliable, the loaders are lazy. I've gone through everyone and realized there's only one person I can trust with this. It's you." I felt pride rise in my chest. He chose me, not the strongest, not the most experienced, me. He talked about trust, about reputation, about how after this everyone would know I was a man of my word. He didn't mention money, and I didn't ask. The job was harder than I expected. The barrels were huge. The road was washed out by rain. I pushed a cart through mud up to my knees. I was afraid of dropping the load. I barely slept. My back ached. My hands were scraped and raw. But I finished it. When the celebration started, I went up to Leo. I was exhausted. I was hoping, at least, for a simple thank you. He glanced at me and said, "Good. Put everything by the kitchen and don't get in the guests' way." Then he turned to the client with a wide smile. "Look at the wine I managed to get for you." That was the first time I truly felt used. I stood off to the side, watching him receive praise for work I had done. Inside, it was a strange mix: resentment, exhaustion, and confusion. Later that evening, I ran into Victor, an older neighbor, a former judge. He rarely got involved in other people's affairs, but he always noticed more than he said. He looked at my hands, at the tiredness in my eyes, and asked calmly, "Brian, did he pay you?" I shook my head. "He said he only trusts me." Victor nodded, like he'd heard it before. "People often call it trust when it's really just shifting responsibility," he said. "If you were given the task with no choice and no price, that isn't trust. It's convenience." He paused. "In court, we never focused on words. We looked at outcomes. Real trust strengthens a person. False trust makes them irreplaceable, but only for other people's problems." He said it calmly, without pressure. And that's why I remembered it. I realized I wasn't proud because I'd done something important. I was proud because I was the only one willing to work for free. Since then, when someone says, "Brian, only you can do this," I stop rushing to agree. I ask one simple question: why me? Because this requires real skill, or because it requires patience without pay? And strangely enough, after that, many conversations end on their own. Don't chase being irreplaceable in places where you're valued only for your willingness to endure. Real respect doesn't make you the only one. It makes you equal. This trap is simple. A manipulator almost never asks you in private, where you can think, ask questions, or say no. They wait for an audience, colleagues, friends, family. Any crowd will do. Then they move. They don't start with a request. They start with praise, loud, polished, dramatic. Look at Brian, a model of generosity. He never refuses anyone. You can always rely on him. It feels good. People smile, nod, some clap. But hear me, in that moment, a noose goes around your neck. Because the praise is immediately followed by the ask, and it's already built into the identity they just created for you. You were called generous, so now you have to prove it. You were made a hero, so you're not allowed to say no. And you hear, "That's why Brian will do it for free." Or, "Of course he'll lend the money." For him, money isn't the point. The trap snaps shut. If you refuse on the spot, in front of everyone, you destroy the role they just gave you. The crowd flips fast. Admiration turns into disappointment. The manipulator knows this. They hold your reputation hostage. This is social pressure. You're denied the right to be a normal person, with limits, fatigue, priorities. You're turned into a monument to your own image. And monuments don't argue, they don't rest. They just stand there, serving someone else's goals. I fell for this as an adult, when I thought I couldn't be played. But one evening is enough to make you fear losing face again. In our town, there was a man named Andrew. He ran a council for community projects, charity nights, fundraising, repairs. He loved the stage, and he could speak in a way that made people feel part of something important. In that atmosphere, saying no becomes difficult. He invited me to a big event, a celebration after the harvest season. The room was full, business owners, families, local leaders. I planned to sit, talk, have a glass of wine, and leave. The evening was fine until Andrew stood up, tapped his glass, and the room went quiet. He scanned the crowd and pointed at me. "Friends, we talk a lot about kindness, but few people act. Among us is a man whose heart is bigger than this whole room. Brian." Hundreds of eyes turned to me. My face went hot. And yes, I felt a flash of pride. But pride is a bad advisor when a crowd is watching. Andrew continued, "Yesterday I told Brian about our problem. The roof at the old children's center is leaking. Rain drips onto the kids' heads. And you know what? Brian didn't look for excuses." He paused, then said loudly, "He's decided to cover the entire repair." Applause. People came up, shook my hand, thanked me. The words sounded bright, but inside it got heavy, because I never promised that. We did talk about the roof. I said I'd think about helping with part of the cost. I didn't agree to pay for everything. But under applause, I understood. Any word I say now becomes either agreement or shame. If I stand up and say, "No, that's not true. I didn't say that," I become the person who refused the children. A crowd doesn't like nuance. It wants a hero or a villain. Andrew knew that. He smiled from the other end of the room like it was settled. He bought the repair with my embarrassment. I listened to the applause and felt a beautiful chain being placed on me. Shiny, honorable. Everyone clapped for the chain, not seeing it was still a chain. At some point, I stepped outside. I needed air. I sat on a bench and loosened my tie. It was choking me. My heart was pounding like after a fight. One thought kept looping. He stole my choice, and I swallowed it. A man I'd known for years stopped nearby. His name was Henry. He was a finance professional, the kind of person who doesn't fall for speeches because he's trained to count consequences. He looked at me and said straight, "You were just bought with applause." "He set me up," I said. "He announced something I never agreed to." Henry nodded. "Public praise isn't a gift, Brian. It's a way to tie your hands. When someone praises you for what you haven't done yet, that isn't respect. It's a contract signed with your name, without your signature." He continued, calm and practical. "If you agree now, you won't be helping children. You'll be paying for someone else's speech, and he'll do it again because he'll see it works. So what do I do? I asked. Take back your right to choose, publicly and calmly. Say, thank you for the trust. I'll help within my means. Smart people will understand. The ones counting on your shame will get angry, and that will prove you hit the target. That sobered me up. The next day, I met Andrew privately. No shouting, no performance. I'd realized emotion is what a manipulator feeds on. I said firmly, I'm willing to help, but I didn't take on the entire repair. I can contribute what is realistic for me without harming my family. Andrew smiled and pushed. People heard something different last night. They're expecting it. This is about reputation. He was trying to pull me back onto the stage. I answered calmly, that was your speech, not my choice. You announced a decision for me. He spoke about inspiration, the common good, the children, beautifully. But the core was simple. He wanted me to pay for his words. I repeated, I'll give the amount I can give honestly. That's it. Then he tried a threat. Then I'll have to explain to people why you refused. I met his eyes. Go ahead, and then I'll explain why you announce other people's decisions without consent. He went quiet. We agreed on a real number, and do you know what happened next? Nothing. The crowd moved on. Crowds forget quickly, but the person who pays out of shame remembers for a long time. Since then, I've kept one rule. If someone praises me loudly in public and assigns intentions I never stated, I don't melt. I bring it back to reality. Thank you for the kind words, but I'm only human, and my resources are limited. Let's not make decisions for me in advance. That line stops the trap from closing. Don't be afraid to disappoint a crowd. A crowd will forget you tomorrow. Be afraid of losing yourself to cheap applause. We think a gossip is a nasty person whispering in corners, wishing someone harm. But a skilled manipulator doesn't serve gossip like poison. They serve it like medicine, like concern, like compassion. And it often starts with one harmless line, I'm so worried about him. That's how a dirty invasion begins. They come close, put on a sad face, lower their voice, and say, did you hear what happened to? I'm really worried. Then come the details. Who fell apart? Who's going downhill? Who lost everything? Who humiliated themselves? The most dangerous part isn't what they say, it's how they sell it. It feels like you're doing something good, caring, sympathizing, keeping them in your thoughts. And a private bond forms. You and I are decent, and he's the one in trouble. That subtle superiority is addictive. You start nodding, asking questions. No way. What else are people saying? And what happens now? Is it true that... And without noticing, you become an accomplice. Because the person who brings you dirt almost never does it to help. They do it to enjoy the fall and to pull you in. You become a bin they dump rubbish into, and your mind gets dirty. You start seeing the person through rumors. You may not know the truth, but your view is already poisoned. And here's the rule. Remember it. If someone discusses other people with you, they will discuss you with other people. Today, you're one of us. Tomorrow, the moment you slip or just walk out the door, that same caring person will move on with the same sad face. Let me tell you a story that killed my desire to listen to news about other people's troubles. I was young, already helping my family in our shop. It was small, groceries, household basics, essentials. The owner was my father, George. He didn't like unnecessary words, but he hated dirt, on shelves and in conversations. In our neighborhood, there was a woman named Donna. She seemed compassionate. Too compassionate. She never sounded openly cruel, always sighing, always worried, always with pain on her face. She could turn gossip into care. One day Donna came in when it was only me and my father. He was sorting stock behind the counter. I was unpacking boxes. Donna sighed, leaned on the counter, and whispered to me, "Brian, my heart is breaking. "Have you heard what happened to David?" I tensed up. David was a normal, hard-working man. "No, what happened?" I asked, and that was my first step into the trap. Donna glanced around, then whispered faster. "Poor man. I'm praying for him. They say his home life is a mess. They say he's started drinking. They say there are constant fights, and they say his bosses are already unhappy. Can you imagine?" And something stirred in me. Something people don't like to admit. Not help, not compassion, interest. I was about to ask, "Who says that? What exactly? When did it start?" Then there was a sharp sound. My father slammed a heavy crate onto the counter. The wood thudded. I flinched. Donna flinched too. My father slowly straightened up and looked at Donna, not with anger, but with cold disgust, like someone walking into a clean home in muddy shoes and smiling. He stepped closer and asked calmly, "Donna, do you have a rubbish bin at home?" She blinked. "Of course, George. Why?" My father didn't raise his voice. "And when it fills up with scraps and rot, what do you do with it?" "I take it out. Outside." He nodded. "Right. You take it out so your house stays clean." Then he leaned in slightly and said, very evenly, "So why did you bring your bin in here and try to dump it into my son's mind?" Donna went red. I'm just worried. I care about David." My father didn't move. "No. If you cared, you'd go to David and ask how to help. Or you'd go home and do something useful. You didn't come here to help. You came to hand out dirt." "You misunderstood me." My father lifted his hand, not threatening, just final. "You're stealing a man's name without knowing the truth. You're stealing my son's peace and the cleanliness of his thoughts. You're stealing our time, and you call it care." He looked her straight in the eyes. "People come into this shop to buy goods and pay money, not to drag in someone else's life, torn into pieces, so you can feel pure next to someone else's pain." Donna tried to smile like it was a joke, but it didn't work. "George, I didn't mean to." "Then take your concern and leave," he said. "Next time, come here for shopping, not with poison wrapped in compassion." Donna left so fast it felt like she'd been pushed out. The bell over the door rang for a long time. I stood there, flushed, awkward, ashamed, for her and for myself, because I realized I almost bought the wrapper. My father turned to me. "Brian, remember this. Bad words kill 3 people, the one who speaks, the one who listens, and the one being spoken about." I asked, "Why the listener too?" He looked at me like I was an adult. "Because without listeners, a gossip can't sell their product. They need a buyer. If you listen, you're buying." He paused. "The person who brings you gossip is like someone handing you a box of sweets with poison inside. Sweet on the tongue, dirty in the mind." Then he said, "Never let your ears become a dumping ground. If someone starts with, 'I'm worried about someone,' wow, stop them and ask, 'Can we help them right now?' If the answer is no, change the subject. Because if you can't help, then the goal isn't help. The goal is enjoyment." Years passed. I watched friendships and careers collapse because of these caring conversations. And every time someone comes to me with a sad face and a lowered voice, I remember that day in the shop. I smile and say, "Sorry, my rubbish bin is already full. I don't have room for your news." And the surprising thing is this: life is calmer when you keep your ears clean. Some phrases sound like a joke, but they hit like a punch. You feel real pain, and instead of acknowledging it, they smile. That's what throws you off, because the attack is presented as care. No offense, I mean it with love. It's a dagger with a velvet handle. The blade goes in softly, so people often don't notice they're being cut. You hear, "Why are you sulking? I was only joking." "Can't you take a joke?" "I mean it with love. I'm only trying to help." Here's the trick. The aggressor takes away your right to defend yourself. If someone hits you with a fist, it's clear. You can step back, respond, leave, set a boundary. But here, they hit you with words, and then they dismiss your reaction. If you react, you become the problem. You become too sensitive, the boring one, someone with no sense of humor, the person who always makes things complicated. And that's dangerous, because you stop questioning the person humiliating you and start questioning yourself. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe something is wrong with me. That's the goal. This trap breaks down self-esteem slowly, drop by drop. First, it's a harmless joke about your looks, then your dreams, then your mistakes, and every time it ends the same way. I mean it with love. For example, Brian, you look ridiculous in that suit today, like a scarecrow. Ha ha. Don't be offended, I mean it with love. Who else will tell you the truth? And you force a smile. Not because it's funny, because you don't want to look weak, but something stays inside, and the worst part is, the boundary shifts. It becomes harder to tell. Is this still friendship, or is it humiliation? You get used to insult as part of the relationship. You get used to people close to you stepping on your dignity and calling it normal. But remember this, where there is love, there is no room for humiliation. Love protects. Love doesn't demand a sacrifice so everyone can laugh. If after being around someone you feel drained, stupid, not enough, it doesn't matter how many times they say, with love. What matters is what it does to you. Let me tell you a story from my family, from when I was already an adult and preparing for my wedding. At family gatherings, there was a man named Frank. He was considered the life of the party. Loud, fun, always with a toast, always with a joke. People loved him because things were always lively around him. But his humor almost always came at someone's expense, and he usually aimed at people who wouldn't snap back, people who didn't want to ruin the celebration, people who kept their face. On the day of my engagement, both families were there, mine and my fiancé's. Frank decided to give a toast. I stood next to my future wife. I was happy, excited. I wanted the evening to feel warm, beautiful, dignified. Frank raised his glass, looked around with a bright smile, and said, "Let's drink to our Brian. He finally found a girl who agreed to put up with his personality. We thought he'd end up alone. Ha ha." A few people laughed, but it wasn't comfortable, because he kept going. "Oh, don't get tense. I mean it with love. Who else will tell him the truth? Brian, don't sulk. It's a miracle anyone picked you at all, with your habits and your talents." And he laughed loudly, pleased with himself. Something tightened inside me. My fiancé blushed and looked down. I saw it, and it made it worse. Because the hit wasn't only at me, it was at us, at our dignity in front of our guests. And in that moment it feels like there are no good options. If you shout, you create a scandal at your own celebration. If you stay silent, it looks like agreement, like you're signing off on being humiliated because it makes the room more fun. A heavy silence filled the room. Some people kept smiling out of habit. Others didn't know where to look. And then my grandfather slowly stood up. No tapping the glass, no shouting, no performance. He simply stood, and his silence was louder than any toast. Frank tried to keep smiling, but the smile started to fade. He understood. This won't be another joke. My grandfather looked at him and said calmly, so everyone could hear, "Frank, when a doctor cuts someone in order to save them, does it hurt?" Frank blinked. "Well, yes." My grandfather continued, just as calm, "And when someone cuts another person with a knife in the street, does it hurt?" "Yes," Frank said, less sure. "So what's the difference?" my grandfather asked. Frank hesitated. "The doctor helps, and the other one harms." My grandfather nodded. "Right." Then he said simply, "Your words weren't helping. They were cutting." You humiliated the groom in front of the bride. You humiliated a man in front of his guests. And dipping the blade in honey by adding, "I mean it with love," doesn't make you a doctor. The room went so quiet you could hear a glass touch the table. Frank tried his usual exit. "Oh, come on. It's just humor. People should take it easier. No offense." My grandfather looked at him without anger, just clarity. People don't say no offense to avoid offense. They say it when they know they're hurting someone, and they want forgiveness in advance. He paused. Humor that requires a victim isn't joy, it's humiliation with applause. If you need someone else's shame to be funny, you don't have humor, you have vanity. Frank went red, muttered something, and sat down. The celebration continued, but the atmosphere changed. People stopped backing his wit. Some looked away. Some realized they weren't laughing because it was funny, but because it felt expected. I stood there and felt something appear inside me. Not anger, but clarity. Later I went to my grandfather and said quietly, "Thank you." He put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Brian, if someone hurts you and then adds 'with love,' it means they understand exactly what they're doing. They didn't slip, they chose it. And if you stay silent, you teach them it's allowed." I asked, "And what if he says I'm boring, that I take things too seriously?" He gave a small smile. Let him. Better to be a respected, boring person than a convenient doormat people walk on while laughing. Since then, I've had a rule. The moment I hear "with love" after a sharp comment, I don't smile automatically. I don't pretend it's funny. I look calmly and say, "That's not funny to me. It hurts." If you respect me, you don't joke like that again. And do you know what happens next? Real friends understand immediately. Sometimes they even apologize. And the ones who wanted to build themselves up at your expense get angry, blame you, push harder. That's the best test. Because someone who truly cares won't defend their rudeness. They'll protect your dignity. Remember, a joke that hurts you isn't a joke. It's an attack, and you have the right not to laugh. And now, the reason I asked you to stay until the very end. This is the most frightening and the most invisible trap, because it isn't built on lies, and it isn't built on aggression. It's built on sincerity. It's a love trap. Most people don't fall into it with enemies. They fall into it with the closest people, parents, spouses, children, people who truly love you, and that's why it's so dangerous. Someone looks you in the eyes and says, "I sacrificed everything for you. I gave up my career. I gave up my health. I gave up my personal happiness, just so you could be okay." And you feel gratitude rise, and right behind it, guilt, heavy, crushing guilt, because you're being handed a bill you can't pay. They don't say, "Now you owe me," but the meaning is clear. I gave you my life, now you have to give me yours. That's worse than blackmail. You can fight blackmail, you can defend yourself, you can cut contact. But here, it's love, it's closeness, it's years of memory, care, real help. And you feel that if you choose your own path, you'll become a traitor. It's like they're teaching you that your freedom is in gratitude, that your desires are selfishness, that your choice is a knife in the heart of the person who lived for you. That's how love becomes a chain. On the outside, it looks like care. On the inside, it feels like a cage. You start living in a way that won't break the person who sacrificed. You choose not what you need, but what won't hurt them. And quietly, you surrender your life, piece by piece. Here's why this trap is so cruel. If someone truly gave something up for you, you can't undo it. You can't give the years back. You can't erase the pain of what they missed. And that's why this line is such a perfect weapon. It gives you no honest exit. Whatever you do, you remain in debt. If you obey, you pay with your life. If you choose yourself, you betray. And that's how a person keeps you close, not through love, but through obligation. So let's say the truth out loud. No one has the right to buy your destiny with the price of their sacrifices, because your life is not currency. If someone chose to step away from their own path, that was their decision, even if they call it for you. You didn't sign a contract that you now have to live on their behalf. Real love doesn't require a deposit. Real love doesn't say, "I died for you while still alive, now lie in this coffin beside me." Real love speaks differently. It says, "I'm here. I'll support you. I'll help you, but you are free, and I'll be glad if you become yourself." That's the line. Love is a door into freedom, not a cage. So if someone says, "I sacrificed everything for you," don't answer with aggression. Don't answer with coldness, because often that person is living in pain themselves. But answer clearly, gently, and firmly. Say, "I appreciate what you did, but I didn't ask you to save me at the cost of your happiness. I can't live your life instead of you, and I won't give up my life as payment for love." And then the most important part, I want to love you freely, not out of guilt. Let's put love back where it belongs. Support, respect, choice, not a bill, not a debt. It's a hard conversation, sometimes the hardest in your life, but without it, you risk living someone else's fate instead of your own. And then you won't just lose years, you'll lose yourself. So we've gone through 8 traps that people call kindness, but that become cages. And here's the main conclusion. If you don't want to live in a cage, don't agree to a love that demands repayment, even if it's family, even if they sincerely believe that's how it should be. Because love without freedom isn't love, it's control disguised as care. Say this sentence to yourself and remember it. I'm grateful, but I'm not in debt. If this resonated, write in the comments which of these 8 traps you fell into most often and how you got out. Your story might be a lifeline for someone reading this right now. Hit like, not for me, but so this video reaches the person who needs it today. Subscribe if you want more conversations like this, without fairy tales and without sweet lies. And in the next video, we'll talk about how success really works, why some people work more and get poorer, and others grow without losing themselves. See you in the next video.